In this video, I show you how you can balance flash and low levels of ambient light in the second part of the Red Riding Hood themed shoot.
AdoramV presents Take and Make Great Photography with Gavin Hoey.
Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and you're watching AdoramV, brought to you by Adorama, the camera store that has everything for us photographers. And today, well, you can see I'm not actually in my little studio. We're out in the woods because we're going to do a Red Riding Hood themed shoot, but outdoors. Now to do this, of course, I need a model, so let me introduce you to Fern. Say hello, Fern.
Hey.
So Fern's joined me again, very brave in this lovely warm, it's lovely out here, isn't it? The UK is always lovely and sunny, and we're going to do a little shoot out here. We're going to mix in a bit of flash as well, so it's going to be an extension of our previous studio shoot. So with that in mind, let's get going. So for the first setup, we're going to do something fairly straightforward, a nice kind of head and shoulder shot out here, and I've got some flash gear that I'm going to use, but let's start without flash and just see what we get. Now the lighting today can best be described as flat, but let's take a shot. Now I'm going to use my Canon 70-200mm f2.8 lens, a gorgeous lens for portraits, and give some lovely creamy blurry backgrounds, especially when you shoot wide open at f2.8. Now I've got to watch my shutter speed here. I've got nothing other than the camera and the lens, no extra lighting, and at 100 ISO my shutter speed is very, very slow, even wide open at f2.8. So let's really bump up that ISO setting, and we can go up to 400 ISO, keep my shutter speed up and my pictures sharper. That's great. So they work pretty well, but they are very flat and lack a little bit of drama. And that's where lighting can come in. We can add our own lighting into this scene to create our own rather more dramatic image. So for the lighting, I'm going to use the Rove Light 600. This is a studio powered flash. I mean, it's a very powerful flash, but the best bit about it is it's battery powered. So there's no cables, there's nothing here that's going to cause me to have any problems even shooting in the woods. We just need to get this in the right position. And of course, I need the little remote control to go on top of the camera to trigger the Rove light. Okay, so let's work out what we need to do for exposure. Now, I'm going to start by taking an ambient meter reading. So I'm in aperture priority mode. I'm in my chosen aperture, f2.8, and I'm going to drop down to ISO 100. That's where I want to be. Now, if I take my ambient meter reading from here, my camera is telling me, wow, it's telling me 1/10 of a second. That's how dark it is down here, and it's the middle of the afternoon. It's crazy dark, but we can work with that. So that's 1/10 of a second. Now I'm actually going to switch to manual, and I'm going to deliberately underexpose the ambient light. So 1/10 of a second, f2.8, ISO 100 is the correct exposure. I'm going to go for 1/30 of a second. So that's a stopping a bit underexposed. Let's just take a shot without the flash firing so you can see how that looks. As you can see, it's a little underexposed, but we still have detail in the background. Now we're going to add in the flash, but we need to work out how bright to make that flash. Remember, my target aperture is f2.8. So let's turn the flash meter on. So all I'm going to do is just pop the meter underneath Fern's chin or thereabouts, and we'll take a meter reading. So at the moment that's telling me f5.6. That's way too bright. I just need to turn this down 2 stops, that's 6 clicks. And then I can take another meter reading, and that's telling me f2.8. So I've hit my target aperture for my flash. My flash is producing f2.8 of light. It's going to balance with the ambient, and hopefully that will just fill in the shadows and give me the shot I'm after. Okay, let's take the shot and find out. Okay, Fern, here we go. So that's lovely. Brilliant. And can you bring your hood up over your head for me? Okay, here we go. Okay, so there we go, we've got some great shots, and that shows you that by balancing the ambient light and the flash, you can get some great shots that give you the best of both, but give you ultimate control over the end result. Okay, so let's try something different. Let's move on, try another location. So we've moved to another location. We've got very different lighting here than inside of the woods, and I'm going to do a very slightly different way of working because the lighting here is bright enough that I might find that my shutter speed goes to my maximum sync speed of this camera, which is 1/200th of a second. So I'm going to jump into TV or shutter priority mode here on my Canon. My sync speed is 200th of a second, but I always work a little below that, so 1/160th of a second. And I'm just going to take a meter reading and let the camera tell me what aperture I can work at. And my camera is telling me f2.8. Now 160th, ISO 100 f2.8 would give me a perfect exposure on the background. I want to slightly underexpose, so I'm going to shoot at f4 instead. Okay, so switch to manual, 1/160th of a second, f4, ISO 100, that's locked in. Now what I need to do is to get the flash to flash at f4, so fern becomes correctly exposed and my background is slightly underexposed. We'll come and take a test reading, pointing the meter reading back at the flash. Okay, I'm actually on f5, so we can just drop that down just a little bit to f4. So my flash is producing exactly the right amount of light and I should get the shot that I'm after. Beautiful. These are lovely. Really good. Yeah, these are fantastic shots. They really are. Okay. Can I get you just to do a little spin? Okay. Let's see how that comes out. Okay. Go for it. Yay, there you go. So we've moved around and we're going to do a different shot. Now we're going to do a wide shot. So I've switched out to my 24 to 105mm lens and I've changed the position of the light. We've now got it going much higher in the air to give a very different lighting look. I need to take an ambient meter reading first of all. So I'm going to go for the wide angle end of my lens to try and get a nice ambient feeling. And I'm going to choose, well, we might have to go up a bit on the ISO. Let's have a little go here. ISO 100 at the moment, f4. And that gives me an ambient reading. It's still about 1/10 of a second, so it's not as bad as it looks. So 1/10 of a second is my ambient. I'm going to switch to manual, and if I had 1/10 of a second at f4, well, that would be correctly exposed, and all of this would be correctly and nice and bright. But to make it a little bit more nighttime-y, I'm going to go from 1/10 of a second to 1/20th of a second. That's one stop. 1/20th of a second to 1/40th of a second. That's two stops. And from 1/40th, well, we're going to go to 1/60th. So that's 2.5 stops underexposed ambient light. So my target aperture is f4. Let's pop the little trigger back on. We need to make sure the flash produces f4 light that hits fern. So let's just get the flash meter and we'll take a meter reading. Here we go. So pop it underneath the chin and it's currently telling me f5.6. So that's a stop of light too much. We can just drop this down one stop, take a meter reading, and I'm getting f4. And in theory, all I have to do is press the button. That's the easy bit. Okay, let's take some shots and find out. Are you ready? Beautiful. That's really good. I'm just going to think about the background when I'm taking these shots. Just try and get a nice shot, a nice background. Really good. So there you go. By combining the ambient light, the flash, changing your lens and changing your position, you can create a whole raft of different pictures. Now all I need to do is to get my favorite picture into Photoshop and do a little bit of processing, and we're going to do that right now.
Don't forget to check out Adorama's latest contest and your chance to win amazing prizes.
It's great to be back in the warm. It was freezing out there, and everybody who worked on that shoot did a brilliant job to disguise that fact. One thing I can't disguise, however, is the lighting on the shots, and I worked hard to try and get the lighting how I wanted it. Nonetheless, there's always a little bit of room for improvement inside of Photoshop, so let's see what we can do. So this is the shot from the very last setup we did, and although it's fine, I've got the exposure the way I want it, I'd like just a little bit more light round by Fern's feet. Now to do it, I'm going to use one of the features here inside of Camera Raw. It's called the radial filter. Now with the radial filter, I can apply all sorts of things. Let's just change the exposure for now. And I'm going to add 1.5 stops of exposure. I just drag out a little circle like so. Now I can move that around and I can pop it anywhere I want. It's worth noting that I've got my circle set so it's on the inside setting, otherwise it would have the opposite effect. I reckon we can go a little bit brighter than that, maybe up to about 2 stops. If I go too bright, it starts to affect Fern's dress and we lose detail there. So I might need to balance up the exposure and the highlights just to bring some of that back as well. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's click the OK button. Now that gives me that little splash of light round by her feet. If I had a second light, I might have been able to add that in a lot easier in camera. But one thing that would have been very hard to add would be some rays of light, because I want to show that the light's coming in from the side, and if we'd had a smoke machine, we might have been able to do that. We didn't, so we couldn't. So I'm going to do it in Photoshop. Now to do it, first of all, I'm going to make a brand new empty layer. So let's go up to Layer, New, and Layer. Now my rays of light are going to be a paintbrush, and the brush I'm going to use I'm actually needing to download first of all, and fortunately I know exactly where it is because it's on my website. So it's a free paintbrush. If you go to my website gavtrain.com, search for ray of light brushes, you can download them for free, and then all you need to do is go back to Photoshop, unzip the paintbrushes, so here they are unzipped, and I'll install them into Photoshop by dragging them and dropping them not on the picture but on the bar along the top where I've got all of the titles there. Now that's installed the paintbrushes, so all I have to do now is go and choose one. Let's go find a brush from here and we'll go down to the bottom and you'll find they're hidden away here. Here we go. I'll just extend that down. I'm going to go with this one right there. So with one click of the brush in the middle of the frame, it adds in a ray of light, but of course I don't really want it there. I need to move it around slightly. And this is why we've put it on its own separate layer, because now I can go to Edit, Free Transform, spin this around and reposition it and resize it and reshape it exactly how I want it, like that. And not only that, but I can also go to the opacity for that layer and change it from 100%, and we'll just bring it down to around about 20-ish. Thereabouts 25, there we go, close enough, that'll do for me. And that just adds a hint of rays of light coming in without overpowering the whole scene. And there you go, that's my final picture completed. Now if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos from myself and the other amazing presenters here on Adorama TV, you know what you've got to do. You've got to click on it's this side, the subscribe button right there. I'm Gavin Hoey, thanks for watching.
Great looking prints at low cost? Be sure to visit our easy-to-use online printing service. Adorama Pix has professionals who treat your images with the utmost care that you can count on. For a quick turnaround on photos, cards, or albums, use AdoramAPix.com.